Before I tell you how everything fell apart, make sure you've subscribed and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I always love hearing how far our stories travel. My name is Clara Winslow. I'm 63. And until last Wednesday, I thought I was living the sort of peaceful life most people hope for after retirement. My husband, Thomas, and I had spent 4 decades in the same cedar-sided house just outside Portland, a place that smelled of pine and fresh bread, where every corner carried a memory. We'd earned our rest. I'd taught high school literature. Thomas had been an engineer, and our only child, Lucas, had built a solid career in real estate. 5 years ago, he married Vivian, a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine, all crisp suits, calm smiles, and perfume that lingered like frost. She worked in finance and always seemed rushed, always important. I used to admire her poise. That morning she arrived unannounced, tapping on the front door with her manicured nails. When I opened it, she stood there clutching her phone as if it were an injured bird. "Clara, I'm so sorry to bother you," she said, voice tight. "I need a favor. I broke my phone and have a critical presentation tomorrow. Lucas is out of town and I don't know where to take it." The screen was a spiderweb of cracks. I told her not to worry. I knew someone reliable. One of my old students, Dylan Rojas, ran a small shop downtown called Fix-It Point. He'd always been bright, the kind of boy who could take apart a radio and somehow make it play Mozart. Vivian exhaled, relief blooming across her perfect face. "You're a lifesaver. The passcode 0819 our anniversary," she added, almost wistfully. Then she handed me the phone and hurried away in her polished black heels, saying she had to get back to the office. The air smelled like rain as I drove downtown. The shop sat between a bakery and a pharmacy, its neon sign flickering in the gray light. Inside, Dylan looked up from a workbench cluttered with cables and tiny screwdrivers. "Mrs. Winslow, it's been forever." He still called me that. The warmth in his smile reminded me why I'd loved teaching. I explained the problem, and he promised he could fix it in a few hours. I spent the afternoon running errands, groceries, the post office, the small routines that fill a day when life feels ordinary. When I returned around 4, the ordinary ended. Dylan was standing behind the counter, pale, hands trembling slightly. The hum of the overhead light buzzed like a warning. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He glanced toward the door, then motioned me closer. "The phone's ready," he said quietly. "But there's something you need to see. And you have to promise to stay calm." My pulse quickened. "What are you talking about?" He turned the phone toward me. The screen lit up, perfectly repaired, yet what it revealed shattered far more than glass. There was a hidden folder titled Plan C inside the messaging app. Dylan opened it, scrolling through a string of conversations. My name appeared at the top of several messages. L. Mom's confusion's getting worse. Dr. Penrose is documenting it. V. Good. Once the report's official, the insurance claim will look natural. L. Need to time it with Dad's checkup. V. One at a time, Lucas. 2 deaths in 1 week would raise questions. The words blurred. For a moment, I thought I was misreading them, that this was some twisted misunderstanding. "Dylan, what is this?" He swallowed hard. "Mrs. Winslow, I was testing the screen when a notification popped up. I shouldn't have looked, but I saw your name. I couldn't ignore it." I scrolled further, my hands ice cold. Vivian's next message read, "Their life insurance totals $1.8 million. We'll start over once it's done." I felt the room tilt. My knees buckled, and Dylan rushed around the counter to steady me. "My own son?" The words came out as a whisper. "He's planning to kill us." He guided me to a stool, pressed a glass of water into my hands. "You need to go to the police." "They'll never believe me," I murmured. "It'll be the word of a forgetful old woman against 2 respectable adults." "Then collect evidence," he said firmly. "Photograph everything, every message, every date." His steadiness anchored me. I took my phone, snapping photos of each thread, each timestamp. The screen's cold glow painted my shaking fingers blue. When we'd finished, Dylan restored the phone to its original state, no sign of tampering. "If they suspect anything, you could be in danger," he warned. "Act normal." Outside, dusk had swallowed the city. I drove home through sheets of rain, the wipers beating like a pulse. Every streetlight seemed to flicker with menace. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the mirror, pale, rigid, eyes wide with disbelief. How many times had Lucas called me my sweet mom? How many Sunday dinners had we shared, laughter echoing across this same city? Now every memory felt counterfeit, each smile a rehearsed line in a play I hadn't known I was in. When I pulled into our driveway, the house looked exactly the same, warm lights glowing through the kitchen window. Thomas's silhouette moving inside, yet it felt like a stranger's home. He was on the couch, glasses perched on his nose, watching the evening news. "You get it fixed?" he asked absently. I stood in the doorway, clutching the phone so tightly, my knuckles whitened. "Yes," I said slowly. "But Thomas, I need you to turn that off. There's something you need to see." He must have heard something in my tone, because he muted the TV immediately. When he read the photos, his face changed the way light fades from a room: disbelief, confusion, then a grief so raw it made him gasp. "No," he whispered. "There has to be a mistake. Lucas would never." I didn't want to believe it either, I said, my voice cracking. "But it's him. It's Vivian. They're planning everything." He looked up at me, eyes brimming. "What do we do?" "We stay calm," I said, surprised by how firm I sounded. "We act normal, and we prepare." That night, we sat side by side at the kitchen table, canceling credit cards, changing passwords, revoking online access. We found small withdrawals, 200 here, 300 there, all routed to an unknown account. The pattern was clear. Thomas stared at the numbers. "We gave him power of attorney last year, remember? Just in case something happened to us." The irony sliced through me. We'd trusted him so completely we'd handed him the keys to our own destruction. We made a pact before bed. No confrontations yet. No panic. We'd gather evidence first. But when the phone rang later that evening, and Vivian's smooth voice filled the line, "Clara, just checking if the phone worked fine. You didn't have any issues, did you?" My heart thundered so loudly I thought she could hear it. "It's perfect," I replied evenly. "Thank you for trusting me with it." She laughed softly. "You're the best, Clara. Really." When I hung up, Thomas looked at me across the room. The quiet between us said what words couldn't. The life we knew had ended the moment I repaired that phone. That night, neither Thomas nor I slept much. Every sound, the ticking of the old mantel clock, the wind scratching against the window, felt amplified, threatening. Around 3 a.m., I got up to check that the doors were locked for the third time. Thomas followed me into the hallway, bleary-eyed, whispering, "Clara, come back to bed." "But how do you sleep knowing your only son is planning your death?" By morning, I felt like I had aged 10 years. My coffee went cold in my hands as I stared at the table, thinking about the messages Dylan had shown me. The words swam in my mind like poison. At 9, I called Dr. Penrose, our family physician for over 20 years. If Lucas and Vivian had manipulated him to document cognitive decline, I needed to know. "Clara, I can see you this morning," he said, his usual cheerfulness sounding forced. "Come in at 10. Thomas insisted on driving me." "If he's involved," he said grimly, "I don't want you alone with him." The clinic smelled of antiseptic and false warmth. When we stepped into his office, Dr. Penrose smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Clara, Thomas, I wasn't expecting both of you." I kept my tone polite. "I've been hearing that you're worried about my memory, doctor, that I've been confused lately." His face stiffened. Lucas mentioned some concerning episodes. Forgetfulness, confusion about dates. Episodes that never happened. I cut in sharply. "I'm here to see exactly what you've documented." He hesitated, then turned his monitor so I could read. There, in neat digital text, were the words, "Patient exhibits signs of cognitive decline, as reported by Sun. Recurrent confusion and forgetfulness. Recommend neurological evaluation." I stared at the screen. "That's a lie. I was just recording what Lucas told me," he stammered. "You're a doctor," Thomas said, his voice steady but cold. "You know what a record like that means when we die accidentally." Color drained from the man's face. "Clara, I had no idea." "You do now," I interrupted. "And you're going to print that record, sign it, and add a note stating that after examining me, you found no signs of cognitive impairment. Today's date, your signature. Do you understand?" He swallowed hard, nodded, and did exactly that. When he handed me the papers, His hands shook. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Be sorry enough to tell the truth if the police ever ask," I said, and left without another word. Back home, we sat at the kitchen table again. Papers spread out before us like a battlefield map. Thomas traced a finger along the forged reports, the bank withdrawals, the insurance letters we'd started gathering. "This isn't just murder for money," he said quietly. "It's erasing us, making it look natural." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. It was Vivian, perfectly composed as always, holding a box of pastries and her now pristine phone. "Just wanted to thank you again for helping me," she said brightly. "You're a lifesaver." Her smile was sunlight over ice. "You're very welcome," I said, matching her calm. "Come in for coffee." She hesitated for half a second, maybe calculating whether that was safe, then stepped inside. As she sat, I noticed how her eyes roamed the kitchen, lingering on the counter near our medication box. "How's Thomas?" she asked casually. "Lucas said he's been feeling tired lately." "He's fine," I said. "We both are." She stirred sugar into her coffee with the grace of a dancer. "You know, Lucas worries about you too. Especially you, Clara. He says you've been forgetful. Have you thought about seeing a specialist?" It took every ounce of restraint not to slam my fist on the table. "I did, actually," I said sweetly. "This morning. Dr. Penrose says my memory's excellent, better than most people my age." The slightest flicker crossed her face annoyance, maybe even fear before she composed herself again. "That's wonderful," she said, smiling too widely. "I'll let Lucas know." "Oh, do," I replied. "Tell him we'll have dinner soon, maybe tomorrow." Her eyes flicked up to mine, sharp as glass. "Dinner?" "Yes," I said. "He called while you were gone, suggested it himself." I saw it then, the quick tightening around her mouth, the calculation behind her eyes. She wasn't sure whether Lucas had told me that, or if I was setting a trap. She masked it well, but not fast enough. "Lovely," she said after a pause. "I'll bring wine. You know how Lucas loves a good vintage." I smiled, my heart pounding. Perfect. After she left, Thomas exhaled the breath he'd been holding. "She knows," he said. "I know," I replied, "and now they're going to move faster." The next evening came like a thundercloud. The lasagna baked in the oven, its familiar scent turning my stomach. We'd hidden a small voice recorder under the dining table, Thomas's old work device. Every word tonight would be captured. At exactly 7, the doorbell rang. Lucas stood there, tall, handsome, and every inch the son any parent would be proud of, except I could see it now. The rehearsed warmth, the artificial ease. Beside him, Vivian smiled her impeccable smile, holding a bottle of red wine. "Mom, Dad, we've missed you." He hugged me, and I had to bite my tongue to stop from trembling. His cologne, the same one I'd given him for his 35th birthday, made my throat tighten with something that wasn't love anymore. We sat at the table. Lucas poured the wine, raising his glass. "To family and to the future." "To family," I echoed, pretending to sip. Thomas did the same. The meal unfolded like a play. They asked about our sleep, our health, our routines. Vivian took careful notes on her phone, pretending to check her messages. "So, Mom," Lucas said finally, "have you thought about getting tested again? Sometimes early dementia can progress quickly." "Funny," I said, cutting my lasagna. "Dr. Penrose said I'm sharper than ever." He froze for half a second. "Oh, you saw him?" "Yes, yesterday. He didn't mention your visits, though. Strange, isn't it?" The silence at the table was thick enough to choke on. Vivian broke it with a soft laugh. "You know doctors always so discreet." Thomas leaned back, his voice calm but firm. "We've been thinking about traveling. Maybe Florida for a while." Both their heads snapped up. "Traveling?" Lucas repeated. "That's sudden." "We just thought some sea air might be nice," I said lightly. "Before the winter." Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You'll let us help with the arrangements, of course." "That won't be necessary," Thomas replied. For the rest of dinner, the conversation limped along, full of polite smiles and hidden daggers. When they finally left, promising to check in soon, Thomas and I just sat there in silence, staring at the untouched glasses of wine. "They're accelerating," he said at last. "Yes," I whispered. "And so will we." The next morning began in eerie quiet, one of those mornings when even the birds seemed to sense a storm coming. Thomas sat at the kitchen table with the morning paper untouched. The smell of coffee hung in the air, but neither of us drank it. I was replaying last night's dinner, again and again, in my mind. The way Lucas's smile had twitched when I mentioned Dr. Penrose. The way Vivian's hand had hovered over her wine glass, but never quite touched it. She'd watched us too closely, like a scientist observing lab rats. "They're moving fast," Thomas murmured. "That dinner wasn't a reunion. It was reconnaissance." I nodded. "They were confirming how much time they think we have left. We needed more proof. The fragments we had, messages, forged notes, recordings, were enough to terrify us but not to protect us. That was when I decided to visit the clinic again. I wanted everything Dr. Penrose had on record, every form, every note Lucas might have influenced." "Let me come," Thomas said. I shook my head. "If they're watching, it's safer if we split up." He didn't like it, but he didn't argue. At the clinic, the receptionist looked up, startled. "Mrs. Winslow, back again?" "Just need to pick up my medical file," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. She hesitated, that small flicker that tells you someone's been told to be cautious. "I'll get Dr. Penrose." He came out moments later, trying for pleasantness. "Clara, I already amended your file yesterday. Was there something else?" "Yes," I said evenly. "I'd like printed copies of everything. Every note you've written about me. From the day Lucas first called you until now." His mouth opened, then closed again. "Why?" "Because I don't intend to die confused," I replied. "And I'd like my memory to stay on paper exactly as it is clear." He printed the records. While the pages rolled out of the machine, I caught a glimpse of his computer screen open emails, one of which bore the subject line, "Follow-up on cognitive assessment." The sender was Vivian Roth. "Print that too," I said quietly. I shouldn't." "Then I'll call my lawyer," I said, "and she'll subpoena it." He sighed, clicked print again. I watched the evidence slide out, an email dated 3 weeks earlier. From Vivian Roth to Dr. Michael Penrose. "Just a gentle reminder to include increasing confusion in your next patient summary for Mrs. Winslow. It will help with the insurance renewal process." Insurance renewal. The same policy they plan to cash in. I folded the pages carefully, tucked them into my purse, and looked him straight in the eye. "You've been manipulated, doctor. But you're going to fix it. And if you breathe a word of this to Lucas or Vivian, I'll make sure you lose more than your license." He nodded silently, shame coloring his cheeks. Outside, rain had started again, thin, cold threads that soaked my hair as I crossed the parking lot. I drove home gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in my life. Thomas was waiting by the window, pacing. When he saw me, relief washed over his face. "You were gone so long." I thought. "I'm fine," I said, handing him the papers. "Look." He spread them out across the table, reading each line, his jaw clenched. They had the doctor on their payroll. They had everyone, I said bitterly. Our bank, our insurance, our physician. They didn't just want to kill us. They wanted to rewrite who we were first. That evening, we did something that felt almost ceremonial. We took every document, the fake notes, the texts, the emails, and laid them out neatly on the dining table. Then we turned off the overhead light and left only one lamp burning. Its yellow glow fell across the papers like stage lighting. Thomas looked at me. "You said last night we'd move faster. What's our next step?" "Leverage," I replied. "We'll let them think they're winning, but we'll be ready to strike first." I told him about an old friend from my teaching days, Nora Bell, who now worked at the city library and had connections in local media. "If anything happens to us," I said, "Nora will know exactly who to send these to." Thomas nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of that plan. But he wasn't done. "We need legal protection too." That's when I remembered Amelia Trent, one of my former students, now a lawyer with her own practice. She'd been a quiet, determined girl, the kind who'd argue ethics with professors twice her age. I called her the next morning. Her voice was calm, professional, but when I explained the situation, it sharpened. "Clara, don't say another word on the phone," she said. "Come to my office right now. Bring everything." Her office sat above a bakery, the smell of cinnamon and butter filling the hallway. She looked older but stronger, her sharp brown eyes softened by empathy. When I laid out the documents, she read in silence for almost half an hour. Finally, she looked up. "This isn't paranoia," she said. "It's a coordinated fraud and murder conspiracy." The words hung heavy between us. "I'll start paperwork to revoke Lucas's power of attorney immediately," she continued. "We'll file a formal complaint with the state police and the bank, but discreetly. And Clara," she paused, "don't confront them yet, not until we're ready." I nodded. "We've already arranged some precautions." Amelia leaned forward. "Good. But understand something, people like Vivian don't give up when cornered. They double down. You need to be careful." "I intend to be," I said. As I stood to leave, she touched my hand. "You once told me literature was about finding truth beneath lies. You were right. Now you'll prove it again, just in real life." That night, the phone rang again. Thomas answered on speaker. Lucas's voice came through, warm and casual. "Mom, Dad, Vivian and I were thinking, maybe we should have dinner again this weekend. There's something important we'd like to discuss." Thomas met my eyes. His hand trembled slightly as he lowered the phone. "Of course," I said, forcing my voice steady. "We'd love that." When the call ended, Thomas whispered, "You think it'll happen then?" "Yes," I said quietly. "But this time, we won't be their victims." I looked out the window at the rain pooling beneath the streetlight. Somewhere in that reflection, I no longer saw the frightened woman from before. I saw something colder, steadier, a woman ready to end this nightmare on her own terms. The days leading up to that second dinner felt like living inside a pressure cooker. Every minute stretched taut, every sound sharpened. Thomas tried to distract himself with his crossword puzzles, but half the time he filled the boxes with the wrong words. I spent hours pretending to read, though the same sentence would blur before my eyes. Our house had become both a sanctuary and a prison. We spoke in low voices even when we were alone, afraid that somehow they might be listening, because maybe they were. 2 mornings before the dinner, I caught sight of a black SUV parked across the street, tinted windows, engine idling. When I stepped out onto the porch, it drove off slowly. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe Vivian had decided to keep us under surveillance. "We're running out of time," Thomas said that evening, staring at the curtains. "We need to make our move before they do." He was right. So, we finalized the plan. First, we called Amelia again and told her about the dinner invitation. Her tone was calm but urgent. "Clara, that's exactly the kind of setup they'll use to make it look natural food, drinks, easy to manipulate. Let me contact Chief Rowan in the state police. He owes me a favor." Within the hour, Amelia called back. "You'll have protection," she said. "2 plainclothes officers will be stationed nearby. They won't intervene unless you give a signal, but they'll record everything." "What signal?" I asked. "Mention the word coffee grinder. That's your trigger." Thomas scribbled it on a post-it and stuck it under the table lamp, as if we'd forget the code word that might save our lives. The next day, the phone rang again. This time, it was Vivian. "Clara," she said, syrupy, sweet. "Lucas and I can't wait for tomorrow. We'll bring that lovely Merlot you liked last time." "That's thoughtful," I said, voice steady. "We'll have lasagna again, your favorite, right?" Her laugh tinkled through the receiver. "You know me so well." When I hung up, I turned to Thomas. "She's too cheerful. It's her tell. She's nervous." "Good," he said. "Maybe she'll make a mistake." We spent the rest of the day preparing the house not for dinner, but for war. Thomas checked the smoke alarms, the locks, the kitchen cabinets. I went through the pantry and threw away anything unsealed. We used bottled water, sealed wine, untouched spices. Every knife was cleaned, dried, and set in place. By nightfall, the fear in my chest had hardened into resolve. I wasn't the fragile woman who'd nearly fainted in Dylan's repair shop. I was a mother ready to fight for her life. The evening arrived, cloaked in quiet tension. I wore a soft blue sweater, the same one I'd worn when Lucas graduated college. Maybe some part of me wanted to remind him who I'd been before greed turned him into a stranger. The doorbell rang at 7 sharp. "Here we go," Thomas murmured it. I opened the door, forcing a smile. "Lucas, Vivian, right on time." Lucas hugged me. His embrace felt calculated, his heart beating calmly against mine. "We missed you, Mom." "Come in," I said. They entered like actors walking on stage, Vivian with her perfect hair and designer bag, Lucas with that confident half smile that used to melt my heart. The wine bottle gleamed under the kitchen light. "Let me pour," he offered. No, I said quickly. "You sit. Thomas will do it." My husband nodded, his movements deliberate. He poured from our own unopened bottle instead of theirs, the same vintage we'd saved for our anniversary. Saturday. The small talk began safe topics, meaningless chatter about weather and neighbors. The air felt thick, charged. Then Lucas cleared his throat. Mom, Dad, we actually wanted to talk to you about something serious. I met his gaze calmly. Oh? It's about the house, he said. We worry it's too much for you now. Too big, too many stairs. We could help manage it, move in for a while. The trap was being set, but not the one he thought. I smiled politely. That's very thoughtful, Lucas. But we like it here. We're not ready to downsize. He laughed lightly, though irritation flickered in his eyes. Sure, but if something happened, say one of you fell or forgot to turn the stove off. Speaking of forgetting things, I interrupted, I've been using that old coffee grinder of yours, the one you gave us. Still works perfectly. Thomas froze for a fraction of a second, then continued eating, pretending nothing had changed. But I knew. The officers outside had just received our signal. Lucas and Vivian exchanged a glance. Subtle but sharp. They sensed something. Anyway, I continued, keeping my tone casual. We've also been updating our paperwork. Insurance, wills, medical directives, all that dull retirement stuff. Vivian's fork clinked against her plate. Oh? She said too quickly. Did you talk to your lawyer about that? Yes. Amelia Trent. Wonderful woman. You might know her, she's quite respected around town. The silence that followed was delicious. They hadn't expected that name, hadn't realized we already had legal protection. Then, like clockwork, Lucas shifted the topic. Well, at least let me handle some of the banking for you again. It's easier if… Thomas cut him off. We've revoked your authorization. Vivian's face hardened. What? You heard me, he said calmly. From now on, our accounts are private. For a split second, no one moved. Then Vivian forced a laugh. You're making it sound like we'd ever take advantage of you. Lucas's hand tightened around his wineglass. Dad, what's going on? Before Thomas could reply, a faint buzz came from my purse, my phone vibrating. A message from Amelia flashed on the screen. They're recording everything. Keep them talking another 5 minutes. So I did. I told them about an imaginary trip to the coast, about updating the locks, about our plan to donate part of our savings to charity. Each sentence was a blade, quiet, deliberate, twisting. Vivian's mask cracked first. Her voice rose. Why are you acting like this, Clara? Like we're enemies? Are we? I asked softly. Because that's how it feels. Lucas stood up abruptly. I think we should go. Thomas's voice was steel. Sit down, son. But it was too late. Vivian's composure collapsed into fury. You've ruined everything, she hissed, not loud, but enough. And that was when the knock came. 3 sharp raps on the front door. Lucas turned, startled. Who's that? Police, a voice called from outside. We need to ask you a few questions. Vivian's wineglass slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. Thomas and I didn't move. We didn't need to. The door opened, and 2 plainclothes officers stepped in, calm but unmistakably authoritative. Lucas Winslow, Vivian Roth, you're under investigation for attempted fraud and conspiracy. We'd like you both to come with us. Lucas looked at me, betrayal flashing in his eyes, though he was the one who had betrayed us first. You set us up, he said quietly. I met his gaze. No, Lucas, you did that all by yourself. Lucas froze. For a long, breathless moment, no one spoke. The 2 officers stood poised in the doorway, one resting his hand near his holster, the other holding a small recording device. Vivian looked like she'd been carved from glass, rigid, white, one tremor away from shattering. Please, she whispered, turning to Lucas, say something. But my son didn't move. His eyes flicked to me, my calm, my stillness, and then to Thomas, who sat at the head of the table, unflinching. Mr. and Mrs. Winslow, said the taller officer, his voice controlled but firm. We're going to need you to stay seated. For your safety. Of course, I replied evenly. Lucas Winslow, the officer continued. We have reason to believe you and your wife attempted to defraud and endanger your parents. You'll need to come with us for questioning. That was when Lucas found his voice. This is insane, he snapped. They're my parents. Do they even know what they're saying? The other officer stepped closer. Sir, we've been monitoring your movements for several days. We've reviewed communications and documents corroborating financial misconduct. We suggest you come quietly. Vivian bolted from her chair. You can't just barge in like this. You have no... She didn't finish the sentence. The shorter officer lifted a small evidence bag, and inside it was her phone confiscated when she entered, by Amelia's quiet arrangement with the police. Her lips parted in shock. Sit down, Mrs. Roth, said the officer. Lucas clenched his jaw. You think we're monsters? No, I said softly. I think you forgot who raised you. He stared at me then, not as a son looking at his mother, but as a man cornered by his own reflection. You set me up, he said again, quieter now, almost pleading. I felt something crack inside me, but not the way he expected. You set yourself up, Lucas. You just didn't think we'd be smart enough to see it. They didn't resist when the handcuffs came out, though I saw the flinch in Lucas's shoulders as the metal clicked around his wrists. He didn't look at us again. Vivian's composure dissolved entirely, her voice rising, frantic, words spilling out in panicked half-truths. You don't understand, she cried. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He promised me. Save it for your statement, one officer said. As they were escorted out, I heard the faint sound of the wine still dripping onto the floor, the same poisoned vintage that was supposed to mark our last supper. When the door closed behind them, silence descended. Thomas leaned back, his face pale but steady. It's over, he whispered. But it wasn't. Not yet. Within an hour, our house was filled with quiet chaos. Officers gathering evidence, forensics photographing the table, Amelia arriving with a folder in hand. She hugged me tightly when she saw me. You did it, she said. They have everything, the forged insurance, the texts, even the substance in the wine. What was it? Thomas asked. She hesitated. A compound containing crushed oleander leaves mixed with sedatives. It would have stopped your hearts in under a minute. My stomach lurched. Oleander beautiful, deadly, almost poetic in its cruelty. I sank into a chair, shaking. They were going to toast to our deaths. Amelia nodded grimly. They had tickets to Belize booked for tomorrow, paid in cash. Thomas pressed his hand over mine. Let them go, he said hoarsely. Let the law take it from here. But even as he spoke, I knew the nightmare wasn't fully over. Not when our son's face would haunt every mirror in the house. That night, after the officers left, the house felt cavernous, echoing. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the broken glass on the floor. The lasagna sat cold on the table. Thomas came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my shoulders. You should rest. I can't, I whispered. Everywhere I look, I see him. The little boy who used to steal cookies from that counter. He rested his chin on my head. That boy's gone, Clara. No, I said quietly. He's still in there somewhere. Buried under greed, under her manipulation, but he's there. Do you really believe that? I hesitated. I need to. Because if I didn't, then the last 35 years of my life had been a lie. The following morning, Amelia called. They're being held without bail, she said. Lucas tried to claim you were delusional, that Vivian fabricated the messages without his knowledge, but the recordings from dinner destroyed that argument. It's airtight. She paused. The press got wind of it, though. They'll want a statement. I suggest saying nothing for now. Understood, I said. When I hung up, Thomas was at the window again, watching rain blur the world outside. What happens next? We survive, I replied. A week later, we were called to the precinct. Chief Rowan himself greeted us. I wanted to show you something, he said, gesturing toward a monitor. The footage played. Lucas in the interrogation room, head bowed, hands clasped. Vivian in another, pacing, crying. The chief pointed to the screen. She's talking. A lot. About what? Thomas asked. Everything. Apparently she and Lucas had been diverting money for months, and when you started asking questions, they escalated. But she's trying to cut a deal claiming Lucas was the mastermind. I stared at the grainy image of my son. He looked so small, so lost. The arrogance gone, replaced by something hollow. She's lying, I said. He was no victim. But she made him believe he could get away with it. The chief nodded. We'll sort it out. For now, you're safe. But I'd advise staying somewhere else for a few days. The press is circling. We thanked him and left, stepping out into the pale morning light. The city smelled of wet asphalt and fresh starts. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without fear. Still, as I walked to the car, I couldn't stop thinking. How do you mourn someone who's still alive, but no longer the person you loved? That night, I sat by the window long after Thomas had gone to bed. Across the street, the shadows moved gently in the wind. The house was quiet again, too quiet. I took out one of the photographs from our hallway, the one of Lucas as a child, smiling, missing his 2 front teeth. I ran my fingers over his face and whispered, "Why?" No answer came, only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant roll of thunder. For the first time in my life, I prayed not for forgiveness but for understanding. A few days after the arrests, Amelia called again. Her voice had that careful tone lawyers use when they're about to deliver something you don't want to hear. "Clara," she said, "I need you and Thomas to come by the precinct this afternoon. Chief Rowan wants to go over new findings." My stomach tightened. "New findings?" "Yes," she said softly. "It concerns the toxicology reports. Just be prepared." When we arrived, Chief Rowan greeted us with the same solemn expression I'd seen on doctors who deliver terminal diagnoses. He gestured toward a folder on his desk. "We completed the analysis of the samples from your home, the wine, the medications, and your personal health records." Thomas leaned forward. "Just tell us." The chief opened the folder. The substance found in the wine was indeed oleander lethal if consumed. But that's not all. "Mrs. Winslow, you already had small amounts of oleander toxin in your bloodstream before the dinner." I froze. "What?" "It means," Amelia said carefully, "someone's been poisoning you slowly for at least 2 to 3 months." The room tilted for a second. I felt Thomas's hand grasp mine, grounding me. "But I haven't been sick, just tired, dizzy sometimes." Chief Rowan nodded. "Those were early symptoms. They likely used small doses mixed in food or drinks, enough to mimic natural decline, the perfect setup for their dementia story." I covered my mouth, trembling. "My God," Thomas's voice was tight with fury. "So even before that dinner?" "Yes," Rowan confirmed. "It had already begun." The drive home was silent, the kind of silence that hums, that fills every breath with questions too painful to ask. I sat on the couch, staring at my hands, the same hands that had once spoon-fed my son soup when he was sick, tied his shoes, cupped his cheeks after nightmares. Those same hands had unknowingly carried food laced with poison. Thomas broke the silence first. "He started killing you months ago." The words hung in the air like a sentence. "He started killing us," I corrected softly. He turned to me, eyes glistening. I can't understand how we didn't see it." "We weren't supposed to," I whispered. He made sure of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of the morning coffees Lucas made whenever he visited. "Let me do it, Mom," he'd say, flashing that same boyish grin. He'd always bring pastries, the sweet kind I loved. I could still taste the bitterness that sometimes followed, but I'd brushed it off as old beans or too much sugar. Now I knew. At 3 a.m., I went to the kitchen and opened the cabinet where our coffee mugs stood lined up like obedient soldiers. Each one had its memories, birthdays, anniversaries, vacations. I picked one up and traced the faded letters. "World's best mom." For a moment, I felt anger so sharp it stole my breath. Not at the poison, not at the lies, but at the years I'd spent believing love could never curdle into hate. The next morning, Amelia came by with new papers. "I've petitioned for a restraining order. Even from prison, Lucas won't be able to contact you directly," she said, "but you might still receive letters." "I don't want to hear from him," I said flatly. "Understandable," she replied, "but sometimes closure comes from understanding, even when it's ugly." Thomas shook his head. What closure could there be? Amelia hesitated, then slid another file toward us. "Vivian's talking. She's negotiating a plea deal." I felt my stomach knot. What is she saying? That it was all Lucas's idea, that he manipulated her, not the other way around. "She claims he's been planning your deaths for over a year." "That's a lie," I said. "Maybe," Amelia said carefully, "but she's very convincing." Thomas's face darkened. "So she gets leniency by painting our son as a monster?" "She's offering details that only someone involved could know," Amelia said. "Specific dosages, forged documents, even names of people who helped process the fake insurance." "And we believe her?" I asked, voice rising. Amelia looked at me sadly. We have to investigate everything. Truth doesn't always come clean. That evening, Thomas poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to me. His hand trembled slightly. I can't even drink from my own kitchen anymore, he said, his voice cracking. Everything feels poisoned. I reached out, touching his hand. Then we start over somewhere else. A clean slate. He looked up. Leave this house? Yes. It's not a home anymore. It's a crime scene. He nodded, but I saw the ache in his eyes. Every room held memories. Every photograph on the wall was a lifetime we'd built for the son who'd tried to erase us. The next morning, the phone rang again. It was Chief Rowan. Mrs. Winslow, he said, you might want to come in. We found something new in Vivian's apartment. When we arrived, he led us into an evidence room. On the table was a small leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with looping handwriting. The first page was dated 5 years earlier. I thought I'd never have to use oleander again. But Lucas is growing impatient. He says his parents are easy targets, old, naive. He doesn't know he's just a tool. I blinked. What is this? Vivian's journal, the chief said. Or at least that's what it appears to be. He flipped a few pages. The entries detailed the plan. Fake medical decline, forged documents, poisoned coffee, life insurance transfers. But then, in later entries, the tone changed. Lucas is too emotional. He'll ruin everything. Once it's done, I'll disappear. He doesn't know that part yet. Thomas let out a low, guttural sound, part disbelief, part rage. She was planning to kill him too, Rowan nodded grimly. It fits the pattern. Vivian has another record, a previous guardian's suspicious death in another state. It's being reopened. I pressed my palms to my face. So she's done this before. Yes, Rowan said quietly. She's a predator who finds vulnerable, greedy men and turns them into accomplices. And our son, I whispered, was her latest victim. For the first time in months, I didn't feel just anger, I felt pity. Not forgiveness, not love. Just the ache of knowing how far someone can fall when they mistake manipulation for affection. That night, Thomas and I sat in silence again. The air in the house felt heavier, the walls themselves seeming to absorb the horror. Finally, he spoke. You know, I thought the worst pain was the betrayal. But it's this knowing that our son might have believed she loved him. I nodded slowly. He traded his soul for her approval. Do you think he'll ever understand? I looked out the window at the streetlights flickering through the rain. Understanding doesn't always bring peace, I said softly. Sometimes it just opens the wound again. 2 days later, Amelia called again, this time sounding cautious, almost hesitant. Clara, I know you didn't want to see him, but Lucas has requested to meet. He says he wants to tell you the truth, his truth. It might help close the case against Vivian. My stomach tightened. What truth could justify what he did? I don't know, Amelia said quietly, but he insisted you'd want to hear it. The choice is yours. Thomas was standing by the window, arms crossed. No, he said immediately. He doesn't deserve another minute of our lives. I looked at him, and my voice came out barely a whisper. I need to hear it. The next morning, we went to the detention center. The building was all concrete and silence, with echoes that felt like ghosts. A guard led us down a sterile hallway to a small, glass-walled room. Inside, Lucas sat at a metal table, his hands cuffed. He looked smaller somehow, shrunken. His once proud posture slumped, his face hollowed by sleepless nights. When he saw us, his eyes flickered surprise, guilt, and something else. Relief, maybe. Mom, Dad, he began, his voice raw. Thomas stayed silent. I sat across from him, folding my hands in my lap to stop them from trembling. You said you wanted to tell us the truth, so tell it. He swallowed hard. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I said nothing. At first, it was just the money, he continued. Vivian said it was harmless, just moving funds around. You wouldn't even notice. Then she told me about the insurance. Said we'd secure your future, and ours. I thought... He looked down. I thought she loved me. You thought love looked like murder, I said quietly. He winced. She said you were already sick, that you were dying anyway, that it would be peaceful, that I'd be helping you avoid suffering. Thomas slammed his hand on the table. Helping us? You were poisoning your mother." Lucas's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know. Not at first. She said the drops were herbal, for stress. I only realized when I saw the file she forged the one with your medical report. By then it was too late." "So you decided to go through with it," I said. He hesitated. "I didn't know how to stop her. She had everything, the accounts, the signatures. She said if I backed out, she'd go to the police and tell them I forged everything." Thomas laughed bitterly. "So fear kept you loyal?" "Fear and shame," Lucas admitted. "But I swear, I never wanted you dead. I didn't know how to fix it." Silence filled the room. Even the guard by the door looked away. Finally, I spoke. "Do you remember when you were 10? You stole a watch from the corner store. You came home crying, saying you didn't mean to. I made you take it back and apologize. You promised me you'd never lie again." He closed his eyes, his shoulders shaking. "I remember. And now here we are," I whispered. "You didn't just lie, Lucas. You destroyed everything good we built." He looked up at me, tears streaking his face. "I wish I could undo it. Mom, I swear." "Don't call me that," I said softly. The words cut deeper than any shout could have. He flinched as though struck. Thomas stood. "You want forgiveness? You won't get it from me. Not today." As we turned to leave, Lucas's voice cracked behind us. "She was going to kill me too." I froze. It continued. "Desperate now. Vivian, she told someone on the phone that once the insurance cleared, she didn't need me anymore. Said she'd make it look like I killed you both and then myself. There's proof in her apartment voice messages." We looked at each other, then back at him. His face was pale, trembling, but his eyes burned with something that looked like truth. "I'm not asking for mercy," he said, voice shaking. "Just don't let her walk free, please." Outside the room, Amelia was waiting. "Well?" she asked. Thomas's jaw was set. "He says she planned to kill him too." Amelia frowned. "That fits. The investigators found a new SIM card hidden behind a vent in Vivian's apartment. Dozens of audio notes her talking about Phase 2. She mentions making sure no one left to claim suspicion. So she'd done it before," I murmured. "Looks that way," Amelia replied. "The DA's office is preparing to charge her with multiple counts of homicide, including one from 5 years ago. Your testimony and Lucas's might close the case for good." That night, I couldn't shake his last words. Don't let her walk free. Part of me hated him, the weak, frightened man who'd poisoned me. But another part, the mother in me, saw the broken boy behind the bars. The one who'd been seduced by someone darker, older, colder. In my heart, forgiveness was impossible. But pity was harder to kill. Before I went to bed, I sat at my writing desk and opened a blank page. I began to write, not for the police, not for the court, but for myself. He thought love was control. She thought control was power. And I thought motherhood was unconditional. We were all wrong. I signed the page, folded it neatly, and slipped it into a drawer. Maybe one day he would read it. Maybe then he would finally understand what he'd destroyed. It was late March, when the trial began, nearly 8 months since the day Dylan had turned that phone toward me and my world shattered. By then, the case had become national news. Son and daughter-in-law accused in chilling family murder plot. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps like crows, shouting questions we ignored. Inside, the air was thick with whispers, the kind that cling to tragedy. Thomas and I sat behind Amelia at the front of the gallery. Across the room, Lucas sat at the defense table, thinner, paler, his once confident posture broken into slouching submission. Vivian sat beside him, though separate counsel represented her. She looked immaculate, as always, her expression one of quiet control. When she turned and met my eyes, her smile was small, not nervous, not repentant, just measured, like a predator gauging distance. I looked away. The prosecutor opened with quiet ferocity, describing how greed had hollowed out a family, how a son, corrupted by a woman with a history of deceit, had nearly succeeded in murdering his own parents. Each word landed like a hammer against my ribs. When he showed the photos, the text messages, the forged medical records, the bottle of poisoned wine, I felt my stomach twist. It was one thing to know it in theory, another to see your son's handwriting on a plan to end your life. Then came the recordings. Our dinner conversation, captured by the hidden microphone, filled the courtroom. "You've ruined everything," Vivian's voice hissed through the speakers. Lucas's quieter reply, "We'll fix it, just stay calm," echoed like a ghost. The jurors shifted uncomfortably. Even they seemed to feel the chill of that night. When my turn came to testify, I stood, clutching the paper Amelia had folded into my hand earlier, the official statement we'd written together. But when I reached the stand, I didn't read it. I spoke from memory instead. "I carried him for 9 months," I began softly. "I sang to him before he was born. When he was little, he would get scared of thunder, and he'd crawl into my bed, saying, 'Mom, protect me.' I always did. I never thought one day I'd need protection from him." I heard someone sniffle behind me. I kept going. I believed in my son, even when I shouldn't have. I wanted to think this was all her doing. But the truth is, greed doesn't grow in a day, it grows in silence. In every small lie, we forgive because we love someone too much to see who they really are. The courtroom was silent when I finished. Even the judge looked away. When Lucas testified, he barely looked at us. His voice shook as he described how Vivian had influenced him, how she'd promised him a better life, convinced him that we'd be happier gone. Vivian's lawyer objected frequently, painting her as the innocent partner manipulated by an unstable son. But when the prosecution played an audio clip from the hidden SIM card, her mask cracked. Her voice filled the room, cold and precise. "He's too soft. After the insurance clears, I'll clean up the mess. 2 deaths, 1 suicide, and I'll be free." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Vivian stared straight ahead, her knuckles white against the table. Lucas's lawyer didn't object. There was nothing left to say. The verdict came 3 days later. Vivian Roth guilty of attempted murder, fraud, and premeditated conspiracy. Life imprisonment without parole. Lucas Winslow guilty of attempted murder and aiding conspiracy, but with mitigating circumstances. 30 years, with eligibility for parole after 25. When the judge read the sentences, Lucas finally turned toward me. His lips parted, as if to speak, but no sound came. I didn't look away this time. I held his gaze not with anger, but with the quiet acknowledgement that some truths can't be undone. After the verdict, the reporters tried again. "Mrs. Winslow, do you forgive your son? Do you blame the daughter-in-law? Will you testify again if she appeals?" I said nothing. Thomas guided me through the crowd, his hand steady at the small of my back. The afternoon light cut across the courthouse steps like the end of a storm. We walked together, side by side, toward the car that would take us home, or what was left of it. That night, I sat by the window of our new apartment, smaller, safer, emptier. The city lights glittered like shards of glass. Thomas came up behind me, placing a cup of tea on the table. "It's over," he said gently. "No," I replied, eyes on the horizon. "It's never really over, but maybe now we can start breathing again." He nodded. "What will you do with his letters, if they come?" I looked at my reflection in the window, older, wearier, but still alive. "I'll read them," I said finally. "Not to forgive him, but to remember, because forgetting is how it all began." 3 months after the trial, I received the first letter. The return address read Greywall Correctional Facility, the place where Lucas would spend most of his remaining life. The envelope was plain, the handwriting unmistakably his tidy, disciplined, the same hand that had once written Happy Mother's Day cards in crayon. For a long time, I didn't open it. I left it on the kitchen table, next to a vase of fresh lilies. Every time I passed by, I felt its weight calling to me, not heavy from paper, but from what it might hold. Excuses, pleas, or something worse, understanding. It took me 5 days to finally slit it open. Mom and Dad, if you're reading this, thank you for not throwing it away. I know I have no right to ask anything, but I need to tell you that I remember everything. The smell of your pancakes on Sunday mornings, Dad teaching me to fix the shed door, the way you'd hum when you were grading papers. I keep hearing those things in here. They echo louder than the guards' footsteps. I've started working in the prison library. The quiet helps. I've been reading about psychology, trying to understand how people like Vivian work, how they choose who to destroy. But what scares me most isn't her. It's that part of me that wanted to believe her. I let greed become logic. I let love become obedience. And I don't know if I can ever forgive myself for that. Please take care of each other. I don't expect forgiveness, just Don't forget me completely. Lucas. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the same drawer where I kept my wedding ring during the investigation, a drawer that had become something like a museum of things too painful to discard. When Thomas came home, I showed it to him. He read it silently, then exhaled through his nose, the sound of a man carrying too much weight. He's trying to sound like the boy he used to be, Thomas said. He's trying to sound human again, I whispered. Do you believe him? I looked at the page, the tremor in the ink where he must have paused mid-sentence. I don't know, I said, but I think he believes himself. Over the next few months, more letters came. Not often, but enough that I began to recognize the rhythm of his handwriting before opening them. He wrote about prison routines, the clang of metal doors, the smell of bleach, the quiet hours in the library where he sorted old books. He said he'd started teaching another inmate to read. Sometimes, one letter said, when I explain words like mercy or redemption, I realize I still don't know what they mean. Thomas refused to reply. He gets to talk to you, he said, but he doesn't get to talk through me. I didn't blame him. Everyone grieves differently. Vivian's letters came too not to us, but through the press. A journalist published an interview she'd given from prison, painting herself as a victim of emotional coercion. She claimed Lucas had trapped her in the plan. Amelia called me the next day. Don't respond publicly, she said. She's desperate for attention. Her appeal will fail, but she's trying to sway opinion. I followed her advice, but privately, I couldn't stop reading Vivian's words. They were calculated, seductive even on the page. I finally understood how she'd drawn Lucas in. She was a black hole, charming, elegant, and capable of consuming anything that drifted too close. In time, life settled into something like normal. Our new apartment felt smaller but safer. I filled it with plants, ferns, orchids, lavender things that needed gentle care to survive. Thomas took up woodworking again, crafting small furniture for neighbors. Every morning, we walked along the river, hand in hand, sometimes in silence, sometimes in soft conversation about books, recipes, the weather. Little by little, life began to feel like life again. But at night, I still dreamed of Lucas. Sometimes he was a child running down the hallway laughing. Sometimes he was the man from the trial, face gaunt and hollow. And sometimes he was both flickering between innocence and guilt, as though my mind couldn't decide which version of him to mourn. A year passed. On the anniversary of the arrests, another letter came. This one was different, thicker, heavier. Inside was a folded drawing. It was a sketch of our old house. The garden, the porch swing, even the chipped paint near the window. Beneath it he'd written, I still dream of home, but not the house, the feeling of it. I stared at it for a long time. My eyes burned, not with anger this time, but something else, something weary, fragile, like sorrow that had softened around the edges. When Thomas saw it, he didn't say anything. He simply took my hand, squeezed it once, and whispered, Let's go home, Clara, wherever that is now. That night, we walked out to the balcony, watching the city lights shimmer below. The air was cool, clean, the kind that makes you believe. However briefly, in second chances, I thought of Lucas in his cell, sketching our house from memory, of the boy he'd been, and the man he'd become. And I thought of Vivian, trapped in a different kind of prison, one made of vanity and lies, the one she'd built herself. For the first time, I didn't feel hatred, only distance. Some wounds don't heal, they transform. Before going inside, I whispered to the night, I forgive you, but I'll never forget. And for the first time in 2 years, I slept through the night without dreaming. 5 years have passed since that day, the day Dylan's trembling voice told me to run. Time, it turns out, does not erase pain. It simply changes its shape. The edges soften, the sharpness dulls, and what remains is a scar, something that no longer bleeds, but still throbs when touched. Thomas and I now live in a small cottage by the coast. The sea here is loud and constant, its rhythm reminding me that life continues whether you are ready or not. I've filled our home with light big windows, pale curtains, shelves full of books. I can't bear darkness anymore. Our mornings have settled into quiet rituals. Thomas makes coffee, only from sealed tins. I tend to the plants on the windowsill. Sometimes we sit in silence. Sometimes we talk about trivial things, recipes, the weather, the neighbor's dog, the kind of talk that reminds you that peace can exist after chaos. But there are still reminders. Some days, when the wind howls through the house, I'll hear the echo of my son's voice. It comes unbidden laughter from years ago, a child's question about history, homework, the crack in his voice when he called me Mom for the last time. I've learned not to chase those echoes. I let them pass, like the tide. Once a year, we visit Greywall Prison. It's not forgiveness that drives me there, it's truth. Lucas sits behind a glass panel now, older, calmer. The lines on his face seem deeper than his years should allow. There's no arrogance left, no pleading, only resignation. This year, when I sat down, he smiled faintly. "You look well," he said. "So do you," I replied, though we both knew it was a lie. He told me about his work tutoring other inmates, about the prison's new literacy program, about how he'd written an essay that won a state correctional award. "I called it The Weight of Love," he said softly. "I wrote about you." I nodded. "And what did you say?" "That love isn't about deserving," he said. "It's about surviving the consequences when you don't." For a long time, we said nothing else. Just sat there, two people bound by blood and tragedy, staring through the reflection of glass that neither of us could cross. When the guard announced time was up, Lucas stood, his hand hovering near the glass before dropping to his side. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Goodbye, Lucas," I replied. "I didn't say I love you. That word belongs to another lifetime. Vivian will never leave prison. Her final appeal failed 2 years ago. Amelia called to tell me that she'd been placed in isolation after an altercation. Apparently, she'd attacked another inmate who called her a fraud. I felt nothing when I heard it. Not triumph, not pity, just quiet acceptance, the way one accepts the sea's indifference. Sometimes, people ask me why I tell this story. Why not bury it and move on? Because silence is where danger grows. If one person hears my voice and learns to trust their instincts to look closer at the smiles around them, then none of this pain is wasted. So I tell it, again and again, in classrooms, at senior centers, even to strangers who ask about the silver pendant I wear, the one with a small engraving inside. Truth survived. It's not about vengeance anymore. It's about legacy. On our 45th wedding anniversary, Thomas and I hosted a small gathering at the cottage. Old friends came, bringing laughter, homemade bread, and the kind of warmth that comes only from shared endurance. As the sun set over the sea, he raised his glass. "To survival," he said. I added softly, "and to starting over again and again as long as we can." After everyone left, we sat together on the porch. The night was calm, the ocean shimmering beneath the moonlight. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if Dylan hadn't shown you that message?" Thomas asked quietly. "Every day," I said. "He didn't just fix a phone, he saved our lives. We send Dylan a Christmas card every year now. He never replies, but he doesn't need to. Some debts can't be repaid, only remembered." As the waves broke against the rocks, I felt something shift inside me. Not quite peace, but something close, a truce between past and present. I closed my eyes, hearing Lucas's voice from his last letter echo in my mind. "Home isn't a place. It's the chance to keep trying, even after you've failed." I whispered into the wind. Then maybe we both found our way home after all. The stars above were sharp and endless, and for the first time in years, I felt light again, not because the darkness was gone, but because I had learned how to walk through it.